So today we're going to talk about what my UCAS choices were and go through some of the factors that helped me make my decision. My name is Wesley and I'm a final year high school student, and I've recently finished self-studying the international A-levels and have just gotten a conditional offer to study medicine at the University of Cambridge. So I thought I'd start off today by going through how I made the first draft of UCAS choices during my application. The first thing that everyone does is that they go through some of the uni rankings, the QS ranking and the Times ranking to find out where each uni lies, right? So I tried to make a tier list and rank the unis in the three tiers. So the first tier where it's really high up and it would be sort of a struggle to get in, and then the second tier would be middle ground. So I would be happy to study in these unis. And so finally it's like the last tier is just the safety net. In case I don't get any other offers, then that's where I would go to study. And so I evaluated different rankings and I ended up with Cambridge, Imperial and UCL on the top tier, and then KCL, Keighley, Brighton and Sussex, Leeds and Edinburgh in the rest of the tiers. So I'm not going to go into detail which is which. So some people might say that all my uni choices are pretty ambitious, and that is true. But there's one thing to bear in mind is that I'm an international applicant. When I picked my unis, I made sure that most of them, if not all of them, were above the rankings of my local unis. So the reason for this is that if my local unis and the unis that I put into my UCAS application have a similar ranking, but studying in a local uni costs much less, and also there's much less hassle. And so would it be actually worth it to go to the unis that I put in my UCAS application if they're actually on par or lower with the ranking of my local unis? So that's one thing to bear in mind for international applicants. But if you're a local applicant, then you might consider differently and have a wider range of uni selection. So now I have my first list ready, and I have to narrow it down to the 5 UCAS choices. So essentially, for medicine applicants, you only get 4 unis that you can apply to medicine, and the last uni choice is your insurance choice. So now I'm going to go through the 5 factors that I considered when making my choices. So the first thing I considered was the educational style. So for medicine specifically, there are 2 types of unis. So the first being more academic focused, and the second being integrated and practical focused. So the 2 examples that I chose are Cambridge and Imperial. So first off, let's look at the Cambridge website here. So a lot of people tell me that they don't know where to find the correct information, and the best advice I give them is that just go to the university or the faculty website. So, because all the information there are correct, information you get elsewhere might be false. So here on the Cambridge website, if you just type in Cambridge Undergraduate Medicine, you'll see in the course outline. So this is the first thing that I considered, the course structure. So in Cambridge, it's separate into preclinical studies and obviously just clinical studies. And so the first 3 years of clinical studies is basically covering the basic scientific and academic knowledge within medicine. And so the first 2 years, you cover all these different blocks of information. And then in the third year, you get to pick other subjects or do anything that interests you in that year. So in years 4, 5, and 6, so your clinical studies, this is when you get to enter a clinical setting, so a hospital, and apply the knowledge that you've learned in the past years. And the opposite of this is Imperial. So this is just one example. Most unis actually follow this structure. So here you'll see that practical skills will be taught early in the course, and it's integrated. This means that you'll be entering the hospital in a clinical setting very early on in your course. Personally speaking, I would actually be pretty afraid to go into the hospital without all the knowledge. So in this sense, I would rank Cambridge higher than Imperial, because I would like to have the academic foundation done before going into a clinical setting. And then there are also other things to consider. So in Cambridge and Oxford, they have teaching sessions called supervisions and tutorials, respectively. And so this is actually like the main learning method in Oxbridge. So whichever subject you pick, there are lectures and also there are supervisions. So which are small group teachings. You have a few group mates and you're allocated a supervisor, and this supervisor will basically go through the details of different topics with you. And whereas in other unis, it's basically lecture based, so it's mainly just lectures. But for subjects like medicine, they are PBLs, so problem-based learning sessions, and where you learn through questions. And so basically you're given a scenario, and there are a lot of different questions and problems that you have to tackle, and you learn through that. And that's not how I prefer how to learn. If you're a prospective Oxbridge applicant, then you'll have some sense of idea of how the interviews go. And that's basically a simulation of a supervision. And so I think that is a more suited learning method for myself, and which is why, again, I would rank Cambridge higher than Imperial. But then everyone studies differently, and different subjects might have a different method, but mainly you would like to go onto the faculty website and just get a grasp of the course structure and how they teach students. So the second factor I considered is extra support. Now, this might be different for everyone. As a medical applicant, I would consider different unis' research focuses. If you have a specific aspect within your field that you're particularly passionate in, then you would like to go into a uni that has the same research focus or has the same academic focus, because they would probably put more resources into that aspect, and then you can benefit more from that because there are existing facilities and existing top tier professors there to teach you knowledge that you want. Whereas another uni might have different focuses, which is not a bad thing, but this is just a personal preference. Moving on, there's also your support towards your studies. So like I said, Oxbridge uses supervisions and tutorials, which are small scale teachings, and you have that regularly, and so that's quite a bit of support if you consider it. So like 2 or 3 students might have one supervisor allocated to you, and there's also your director of studies and different tutors. And so the fact that Oxbridge has university-based and college-based teaching, I believe, gives an extra degree of support towards your studies. Whereas in another uni, they might have different types of support. There might be e-learning platforms, or have senior students mentor you. And that's obviously something that you would like to consider, because you will want that to match your teaching style. If you're a very self-driven student and you do self-study most of the time, then you wouldn't need that much support. Whereas if you're someone that needs a lot of support to make sure that you're keeping on track, then you would pick a uni with more support. And so the third thing that I considered is networking. So obviously in different unis you meet different people, you have new friends, and you meet different sorts of professors. I think that the people you meet, it determines the type of opportunities you have later on in life. So if you want an academic career, then you might want professors that do a lot of research, and basically someone that can mentor you. And also different unis have different alumni, and you might want to check out their alumni network, and also the employability of students, and to some degree the reputation of the uni within your subjects. Because let's be honest, overall university rankings basically mean nothing. But the subject rankings are much different, because some unis might have more resources and are more focused towards your desired subjects. Now the fourth factor is living. So you're going to be in the same uni for 3 or 4 years, and if you're a medical student, then 6 years. So obviously the living environment, so the accommodation and just the environment of the city, really affects your living quality for the next few years. You might want to consider if you would like to study in London, so where it's more urban, or somewhere more rural and more quiet. Whether you want university accommodation, or are you living in private accommodation, or colleges. All these are good to consider because without basic quality of life, obviously your studies are going to be hindered, and that's the whole point of uni, right? Let's not forget your social life and life in different universities, societies are a big part of uni life. So you might want to go to a uni that has societies that appeal to you. So think about your different hobbies, and maybe there are new things that you might like to try, and just go onto the university websites and maybe different student bodies and see what they have to offer. So the fifth factor is a bit of a practical concern. So the application process. So after you've made your choices and you filled in your UCAS form, then there are a few more hurdles that you have to pass. So some unis might need admission tests and some might not. And even in the same subjects, there might be different aptitude tests. So for medic applicants, you have the UCAT and then there's the BMAT. If you're not really keen on tests, then you might make your application choices based on that, so you can take less. Then, of course, there are interviews. Some subjects might have interviews and some might not. And in different unis, the same subject might also have different arrangements. And then there are different styles of interviews. So look online and see what style of interview each uni uses, and then think about which uni you might have a higher advantage than the other. If you're a person that's not keen on interview, or you think you might not do so well in interviews, then you might pick a uni that doesn't require interviews. So all of this is something to consider before making your choices. Otherwise, you would have to go through these hurdles regardless. If you're looking to apply to Oxbridge and you want to know more about the interview style, then feel free to pop in the comments below and let me know, and I'll try to make a video on that. Moving on to admission statistics. Obviously, you'd like to know what are your chances of getting into that uni before making your decision. Different subjects within unis and different unis themselves would have different competitiveness. So some unis might be more competitive and some might be less competitive. And also, different subjects within the same uni would have a different applicant to offer ratio. So most unis have their admission statistics on their own website. After picking the unis that you would like to study in, then you could look at these statistic tables and then figure out what are your chances for getting in. All these numbers are for reference only, because if you're a stronger applicant, then obviously you would have a higher chance of getting in. So please do make sure that you would like to study in that uni before dismissing it, just because it's more competitive. This is just as a reference guide for yourself to how much preparation and how much hard work you need to put in. So if you're applying to, say, Oxbridge, then their admissions are done by the colleges. Then you might like to look at the different college admission statistics, because different colleges might have more applicants applying towards a certain subject, whereas another college might have less applicants applying to the same subject. But most applicants are actually happy to get in whichever college within Oxbridge. So in that case, the application statistics play a larger role than to picking which uni in general. And then the final thing to consider within the application process are your qualifications. So most UCAS unis are most familiar with the A-levels, and they will require students of different qualifications to meet different grades. And so if I were applying with my local qualifications, then for example, Cambridge might give me a higher offer than Imperial, or KCL might give me a higher offer than UCL, and because admission officers consider qualifications differently. So depending on what qualification you're holding, you might want to look at the faculty websites and admission office websites to figure out what the standard offers towards different subjects are before making your decisions. If you're applying with A-levels, then this information might require a bit less digging. After considering all that, I ended up with my second draft. There were only 3 unis left on my preference list, and they were Cambridge, Imperial, and UCL. And so that list would fit within my UCAS application. So then I started to think about the practicalities. As an international applicant, there are much more things to consider. So the first question that I asked myself: is it much better than your cheaper local unis? Considering all the 5 factors that I mentioned before, does that outweigh the extra costs that you're paying? So the extra tuition, the extra living costs, is it really worth it? And then there are personal reasons. So how much are you willing to pay to experience a different culture, experience life on your own, or perhaps you're looking to settle within the UK? Then these factors would affect how much you're willing to pay towards your studies. And then you're going to ask about the costs of being an international student within the UK. So I then made a table comparing the costs for different unis. Here you can see a breakdown of the most basic fees that international students should consider. And after considering all that, I actually only applied to one uni at the end, and that's Cambridge. And I'm not saying that this is the only way to consider your UCAS choices, and obviously I'm not advising anyone to just apply to one uni. But these are the things that I considered, and if you're struggling to make that choice or for your 5 UCAS choices, then I hope this video was helpful. And if you have any ideas on what content I should do next, then pop a comment down below, and be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.